Development District Number 1. We thank everyone for coming here tonight, and Mr. Steve Klein will be giving us a presentation. But Mr. Administrator, you want to give us a brief overview?
Sure.
Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The village hired Steve Klein and his consulting firm probably a year or so ago to help us set up the TIF districts that we have in place now. And part of the Trefskers project was contemplation of a business development district to help fund that project. And in conversations with Steve and the mayor and the board, the idea was maybe we would expand the boundaries of that business development district to create additional revenue source for the village to kind of address some of the infrastructure needs and other needs that we have in that particular area. So the boundary map that you see up there is the proposed boundary for the business development district, and we're looking to adopt that, put that into effect at our next board meeting, which is in 2 weeks, and then notification will be made to the Department of Revenue, and letters will be sent out to all the businesses within the business development district that they need to start imposing an additional 1% sales tax beginning January 1. The funds that Steve will explain how the funds can be used, and if you're interested in accessing them, how you might probably go about, I guess, working with the village to make that happen. So, Steve, with that, I'll let you maybe explain it.
That was great. You covered almost everything I was nearly into, and the only thing I was going to add is that for any of you that you attend public meetings or hearings we had for the TIF district when it was created. You remember any of that? Well, the reason I bring that up, I know the board is very familiar with that whole process, but the process for establishing a business development district is very similar to creating a TIF district, except that the business district itself is really controlled. It is controlled, like the TIF, solely by the village, but it doesn't affect any real estate taxes. It doesn't affect any other taxing bodies or any other.
I'm sorry, Steve, can you speak into the microphone? Otherwise, we'll have the video but no audio for the tape.
So while we're looking for an area that is fairly compact and it qualifies and meets the qualification criteria of a state statute, that process is very similar to designate a redevelopment area with the TIF district. The business development district is a financing tool that the village can use to try to encourage not only new development to occur within that area, but also to help the ones that are already here. And essentially and you have a map also, which is on the third page of the summary that we handed out to you. It's a little closer up, boundary map of the area. And most of this area that you see is also overlapping the TIF district, one of the TIF districts that the village may have. And so the idea here is that we're able to use the business development district as another layer or another tool to try to incentivize economic development. The real driver behind this whole effort at this point has been the Trefskers Bakery project, and the business development district is going to be used as a source of funds for that project to help reimburse development costs that they're incurring on the redevelopment of the Hobart building. And essentially what the business development district is going to do is that once it's established later this month, it'll authorize the village then to essentially impose an additional 1% retail sales tax on all products that are sold for retail within that business district area, and the tax is applicable to all of those products that are sold now that charge the state's 1% sales tax. So if you're a retailer or if you're a service business and there are certain products or equipment or parts, if you will, that you are required to charge sales tax for, those will all be affected by this 1% increase in the sales tax. There is also what's called a service occupation tax that the village will impose at the same time as the retail tax. This service occupation tax is on service businesses, again, like an auto body shop or a car repair business that might sell parts as a part of their services that they provide. Well, there's tax that's applied to the parts, but not on the services. Attorneys, accountants, and others who are providing professional services are not going to be subject to this service tax that will be imposed because of this. The idea, as you'll see, is that the area really is kind of centered on the trail that runs diagonally up through the business development district. And the idea is that to the extent that we can cause new retail commercial development to occur adjacent to the trail area, then that will create a destination for not only residents to shop, but for people to visit Peoria Heights and hopefully spend more money here in the community. When you create the business development district, what you can do with it then is the village can use the business development district funds for virtually any type of public infrastructure improvement that might need to be undertaken within that area, but it can also use the funds to reimburse private property owners or business owners within the business district. And the types of things that the money can be used for is on this other handout that I circulated that has the list of what's called eligible project costs. So these funds can be used for helping with the costs related to engineering, architectural, planning studies. It can also help reimburse the cost of any land acquisition. So if we have someone who is interested in acquiring some vacant land perhaps within the area and intends to build a new building, the land cost itself could be reimbursed out of the future sales tax that would be generated from this business district, okay? And so forth. I won't go through all of these, but the main difference between what you can use business development district tax money for and what you can use TIF money for example, is that the business development district funds can actually be used to help construct vertical construction of new private buildings, where the TIF funds have some limitations on them with regard to the construction of new private buildings. So the business district funds actually have a little bit more flexibility in how they may be used. If there's assistance offered to a private company or a private property owner, it would have to be done through a written agreement that the board, the village board would approve by ordinance. And what we typically will probably see is that there will be perhaps a business that needs to do some renovation, remodeling, or expansion of their building, and they're going to incur these costs for that. Well, that improvement then theoretically and hopefully will generate additional business. So if, for example, just using a restaurant as an example, because it's easy, if they were to expand and added a dining room and that causes them to be able to serve more customers and bring in more people that would increase their retail sales, then this tax would be applicable to all of the retail sales on the meals that they serve at the restaurant. And that increase of retail sales tax that's generated through the business district then would be a source of funds that the village would have access to be able to reimburse the business for some of those costs that they incurred to improve their building. The 1% increase in sales tax applies to all of the products that are sold that are currently taxed under the state sales tax. So what it doesn't apply to, it would exempt any food that is sold for consumption off premises. So in the case of the Treskers project, this business development tax, this added additional 1%, will be part of what we call the high rate here in the village, as opposed to the low rate. And the low rate is the local portion of the state rate, which is 1% on all retail sales, is collected by the state of Illinois and then returned to the village. But in the case, and that would apply to any donut that's sold, for example, that goes out the door, all right? But for any food that is consumed on the premises that's served for immediate consumption, this additional business development tax would apply along with the state's 1% local rate that's collected here, as well as the food and beverage tax that the village has, which is the 2% tax. You have another home rule sales tax that would apply in those instances, which is 1.5%. And when you add all of those up, the high rate here, for example, for food that's consumed in a restaurant or on-site, for example, at the bakery, will be 5.5% that will be the local tax that will be collected. Everything else would be taxed at the normal 1%. So it's a little different for restaurants and the bakery as to which particular products or sales that this will apply to. But overall, it does create another source of revenue for the village to be able to encourage redevelopment of the community. Let me stop there for a second, and they know me well enough that I could talk in 3-hour increments, and I could probably tell you a lot more about this than what you want to know, but suffice it to say that we went through the process, we looked at every property, the area overall is going to qualify. The boundary is not necessarily written in stone at this point. It could be altered somewhat before we approve it, and the village is anticipating that it will approve an ordinance to establish the business development district on the 19th of April. And this is in advance of needing it actually to finish some commitments that the village has with regard to providing some assistance to the Treskers project. And one footnote that you should keep in mind too is that the business development tax that's generated here overall will all come and be collected by the state of Illinois and will be by Department of Revenue and will come into a special fund of the village. But the portion that's generated by the bakery itself on that property will be then separated into a special account of the village, and that's applied to their projects. So the sales tax that's generated or derived from other businesses within the business development district is not pledged, nor is it obligated for the bakery. The bakery's sales tax is only obligated for the bakery's project. And so the rest of the area will be able to generate funds that will be used to help the other businesses that are here or to make public improvements to streets and other public infrastructure, or to hopefully attract and invite new private investment that will want to come into the area. So that's really all I think I need to add at this point. And the point of the public hearing, obviously, is to open it up for any questions or comments that anyone may have. So
I have a question, Jim Tomlin. Is there any concern about the fact of leaving out of the district those properties to the north of each side of Cyberlane on up to Peoria? But basically similar and in competition with businesses that would be at Heritage Square. Whereas the businesses in Heritage Square would be subject to the additional sales tax, but not those to the north.
I can address that, or?
Go ahead, please. Yeah.
I mean, I think it's important to keep in mind that the business development district can be amended. It can be enlarged at some point in the future. But the immediate goal right now was to secure the district for the purposes of making sure that the commitments regarding the bakery can be fulfilled. And then at the same time, we know we have certain public costs that need to be incurred on the trail. Is it public knowledge about the improvements that the village has been looking at for the trail?
As far as the trailhead?
Yes.
Yes, but we didn't get the grant, so.
Well,
But we're still seeking other funds.
That's all the more reason why the village may need these funds, is because to create the restroom facilities and the trailhead facilities for the trail, which will hopefully bring a lot more people into the community, either by bike or by foot, will also hopefully generate more activity in this area. And they will go uptown, and they will, these other businesses will benefit from that.
The revenue can only be used within the business district.
It can only be used within the business district for private purposes, but public infrastructure, there are some exceptions where the village may be able to use some business district funds outside of the immediate business district area. So improvements to sidewalks, streets, and those types of things immediately adjacent to the business area could still benefit, all right? I think what would be important would be for there to be good communication between the businesses and the village office, and if there is a lot of interest in doing additional work to the buildings in the rest of the downtown, that needs to be communicated to the village. And if at some point in the future, if this is a tool that the village would consider using, it could be amended and expanded to include that area. But right now, we're trying to just focus on this area that we've outlined. And the businesses that are adjacent to it are going to have a more immediate benefit of the improvements to the trail and the bakery and so forth, but there'll certainly be some spillover effect. Rising tide will lift all boats, we believe, as far as the overall benefit to the community. Anything else, or?
I think part of the thought process too on that, it was, to speak to that, was that it's kind of the perception kind of as our downtown starts at or beyond Heritage Square. You know, some of the businesses to the south of there all the way to Lake, which is where the boundaries, kind of terminate. I feel like they're not part of our downtown sometimes, so I guess part of the thought process was if we come up with a tool or a mechanism to kind of help us stretch those boundaries, at least the perception of it with, sidewalk improvements or similar lighting, those types of things, landscaping, what it might be, some signage to where people feel like our downtown maybe starts at Lake and continues all the way up to Glen. So without this business development district, the funds just aren't there for us to do that.
The other question was asked of me had to do with the exceptions out. One of them is a warehouse, and I don't really recognize what the other one is.
One is the Williams building, the office building, I believe, and the other one is Peterson's building, which is down on Scioto Avenue, the grayed out building. It's relatively new building. It's not a retail business, and it simply really wouldn't contribute nor benefit from this. And really the same goes for the Williams building also. It wasn't needed for contiguity purposes. The area has to be fairly compact, but it all has to be contiguous as well. And so we didn't need it for qualification purposes, and it was a newer building.
The Sherman's distribution center isn't impacted by this.
No, they'll be distributing. It's a pickup site, as I understand it.
Right. There's no
for their
sales.
Products right now. We are hopeful, though, that at some point there's some property adjacent to the warehouse itself that Mr. Sherman owns that might lend itself to some future development, so that could possibly benefit from this.
And that is in the district?
Yes, and it's in a TIF district as well.
Thank you.
good questions.
Denny, Roberta, any thoughts?
My questions were answered ahead of time.
Okay. I like to put people on the spot. That's what I'm here for.
There
Jim
is
already stepped into it.
there's a written plan. It's on file here with the village. And the plan provides for it in there a variety of different types of public and private projects that can be undertaken. And so it should be, and it lasts for up to 23 years. So it'll be in existence for a number of years. Okay.
Yeah, we would, everyone here would prefer not to have an additional tax, ideally. The problem is, the reality is, we don't have the money to fix up south of there that we'd like. In fact, we don't have the money, like most communities, to do everything we'd like to do. So to take it a step further, we do have to put this on. And, Jim, it was pretty much like the administrator and Steve said, was that the spirit of it was to upgrade those areas that need upgrading. I think that the feeling is that the uptown area, I call it, from Kelly on north, looks pretty well finished out. It's going to need some work on sidewalks over the years, but by and large, it looks pretty concise and clear and everything. And like the administrator said, we want to try and spread that further south. And unfortunately, we really don't have the money available to do what we want to do. So this will give us a tool to get that done and hopefully increase the tax revenues in years to come. Steve, anything else you want to add? Board have any comments or questions? All right. I think we'll go ahead and move to the...
You probably need to adjourn this public
Okay.
hearing, and then we'll open the next one.
Okay, then, seeing that we have no further questions, we'll go ahead and adjourn the proposed business development and redevelopment district number 1 public hearing. And we will go on to the proposed special service area number 1. And once again, do we need to sign in for that? Separate one, Steve?
I'm not sure where the... we're right here. Just put that right on there if you would. Okay.
All right. 6:05 p.m. is when the meeting
Okay.
Just the candid banter.
So,
Think tank.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and start the proposed special service area number 1 public hearing. Hearing is now called to order. Mr. Administrator, will you give us a brief overview, please?
Well, I think I stole Steve's thunder last time, so I'm just going to introduce Steve Klein and have him explain what the special service area is all about.
I don't think we have a big crowd coming in the door, so we're good to go here. The long and short of it is that the special service area that's being established is purely another tool that the village is using to try to add some security to the bakery project. And this is a necessity because the bakeries asked the village to finance up to $1,600,000 of eligible expenses through the TIF redevelopment agreement. And you're doing this, or will be doing this, through the issuance of a bond. You're borrowing the money to provide the funds to a private entity to redevelop the Hobart building. And so in the course of making the decision to provide that type of support, there are a number of safeguards that have been put in place to make sure that the village is not at risk in regard to having to ever levy its general obligation funds to service the debt. So the rundown of that financing order, I think, is important to understand so that you see where the special service area fits in. You'll be issuing a bond to provide the reimbursement of these eligible expenses. The bond's going to include 2 years of capitalized interest, so the bond funds itself will pay the first 2 years of interest costs. That will give the bakery time to get up and running, so it's generating real estate tax revenue and sales taxes then that will help provide for the principal and interest payments that will start in the third year. The TIF increment is what we call a soft pledge, so that the real estate tax, the new real estate tax that's generated from the improvements that are made on the bakery are going to generate new real estate tax money, which is the first line of funds that the village will draw from for the debt service on these bonds. And then after that comes the use of the municipal sales tax that the bakery is going to generate, or the Hobart building rather, because there may be other businesses in there as well. And we just talked about in the public hearing regarding the business development district, the fact that there will be a variety of municipal sales taxes that will be applying to the sales of Tresker's products, as well as any restaurant sales that might occur there, or in the space that they lease out to another restaurant upstairs or other retail facilities. So it goes TIF increment, goes sales tax, and then if in any year that the village has to make a bond payment and there would be a shortfall in the real estate tax money increment that the bakery generates or the sales tax that it generates, it would then draw upon this special service area to generate the funds that is needed to make the bond payments. And the way this works is that the special service area includes the site for the bakery, and then it also includes a couple of other parcels that the village owns. So there's really only one privately owned property within the SSA area. Get too many S's going on there. And the maximum anticipated bond payment that would be required to be made during the 20-year term amortization of the bond is around $180,000. And so when the SSA is established, it creates an additional real estate tax on that Hobart building to the tune of $180,000 per year. But each year, the village will abate some portion of that $180,000 additional tax to the extent that there's enough TIF increment and there's enough sales tax to otherwise make the payment. But if we're $10,000 short, then the village will abate